Before getting started on 10.2, I want everyone to make sure that they have these 4 words from 10.1 in their vocab chart and defined. If you notice for 10.2, we only have 1 word, so just make sure at the end of the video that you include that into your notes as well. In 10.1, we talked about what was an event and what were our outcomes for different types of experiments. But today we're actually going to look at the probability of an event. So if you look at the first bullet point here, the probability of an event is the number that measures the likelihood that the event will occur. Just like we talked about last week, probabilities are between and include 0 and 1. And you can see by this nice chart here that when we're talking about the likelihood, we're talking about this top row right here. So is it impossible? Is it about a 50-50 chance, so equally likely to happen or not? Or are we absolutely certain that something is going to happen? So you can see the percentages along the bottom here. Of course, 0% means that it's impossible, there's no chance that something's going to happen, all the way up to 100, where it's absolutely certain that that is going to occur. So the closer to 100%, the more likely an event is to happen. Now, the best and probably most common example about probability that you may see on a daily basis, especially if you watch the news with your parents, is talking about the weather. So let's say watching the news and they say that there's an 80% chance of thunderstorms tomorrow. Now, 80% is a pretty high percentage. You can see up there in the chart, it's just over the 75% mark, but not quite at 100%. So if it's an 80% chance, we can say that it's pretty likely it's going to happen, but not absolutely certain. Now, when we want to find the probability of an event, this is where the fractions come into play. When all possible outcomes are equally likely, the probability of an event is the ratio of the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. So yesterday we talked about the difference between favorable and possible. So remember that anytime we're talking about the probability of anything, we put the P out in front and then in parentheses we put whatever the event is, whether it's rolling odds or picking a blue marble. And then from there we have our fraction. So the probability of any event is the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible. Okay, so a nice easy first example is if we are to roll a standard die. What is the probability of rolling an odd number? So of course, since it's a standard die, our total number of outcomes is going to be 6 because there are 6 numbers on the dice. But if we want to talk about just the odd numbers, we know that there are 3. So in writing out the probability, you don't have to put a full sentence. I can just put P of odd, and then I can have equal to my favorable, which is 3, over my total, which is 6, but please don't forget to simplify. So instead of 3, 6, my final answer should be 1/2. In addition to just using probability to find the probability of a certain event, we can also use a given probability to find out a certain number of items or a certain number of favorable outcomes. So in this case, the probability that you randomly draw a short straw from a group of 40 is 3/20. How many are short straws? So I gave you the hint here that we want to solve for proportion. So we are told that the probability of getting a short straw would be 3/20. Now, if we have a total of 40 straws, the probability would have to stay in proportion to the number of straws that we are starting with. So that's where my x is going to go. So 3/20 equals x over 40. Now, if you're looking at it as similar fractions, we can see pretty easily that 20 times 2 will give us 40, which means that 3 times 2 will give us our x, which means that our x is equal to 6 short straws. Now, if you're not comfortable using similar fractions, we could also do the cross product to find our missing value in our proportion. So we would know if we multiply the 2 cross values that 20x would have to be equal to 120. To solve for x, since it's multiplication, we're going to divide both sides by 20, and we would still end up that x is equal to 6 short straws. Okay, so just like we've done before, if you want to go ahead and pause and try these next 3 examples, go ahead, but I am going to go and work through each one. So in example 2, the one with the die, what is the probability of rolling a number greater than 2? So our possible outcomes for numbers greater than 2, I can list them here, are 3, 4, 5, and of course 6. We still have a total of 6 because it's the same standard 6-sided dice. So when I go to write my probability, I can write it in shorthand. So the probability of a number greater than 2, since that's the inequality for greater than, would be equal to my 4 possible outcomes out of 6, which is equal to 2/3. All right, for number 2 here, in example 2, what is the probability of rolling a 7? So no, this is not a typo. The probability of rolling a 7 on a dice is simply just 0. It can't happen, there's no 7 on the dice, so the only probability we need is 0. So number 3 is a lot like example 3. The probability that you randomly draw a short straw from a group of 75 straws is 1 out of 15. How many are short straws? So again, we're going to start with this given probability that they've given us, that 1 out of 15 straws are short. So if we're dealing with a total of 75 straws, we're missing the amount of short straws. To find our x, again, do what you're comfortable with. So if we're looking at similar fractions here, I know that 15 times 5 is going to give me 75, which means that 1 times 5 is going to give me my x. So of course, we could easily figure out that x would be equal to 5 short straws. Now, if you wanted to use the cross product, it would be just as easy. Just multiply our 2 sets of values here. So we would have that 15x is equal to 75, and again, we would have to divide to get x by itself. So divide both sides by 15, and just as we discovered before, 75 divided by 15 would give us 5 short straws.